Hello and welcome to the next episode of my track from scratch tutorial using the Sonicware Liven XFM. In the previous episode, I decided the intent of this tutorial, which is to follow an end-to-end process, creating an entire song on the Sonicware Liven XFM using only preset sounds and using no external hardware, with the goal that at the end of the process, we'll be able to hit play and an entire track will play through. This is intended not so much to produce a great track at the end, but to illustrate the features in the context of actually making music, as opposed to going through each knob and button and talking about what it does. So, the first sound that I'm going to make is going to be on track 1 and is going to be a pad sound. The pad needs to be polyphonic, so we're in polyphonic voicing mode. I've given tutorials on all the different engines available here. I think the simplest for a beginner is probably the library engine, which just allows you to select a preset. But I think that's a little bit less interesting, and I think one of the unique features of the Liven XFM is actually the XLab engine. So synth, function synth, I am already using the XLab engine. So that's good. The XLab engine will allow me to combine two patches to customize the sound to a degree. So given that I want this part to be chordal, I'm going to go for a pad. So I'm going to select two pad sounds. Hold down Shift to select the bank. I'll select pad bank 1 for sound 1, and I will select pad bank 2 for sound 2. I'll turn the crossfade all the way to the left, which corresponds to sound 1, and I'll find a pad sound I like. So I think I'm going to go for the Vox pad. Has some interesting motion. Move to the other end of the dial. I'm now going to pick my second pad sound that I'm going to morph to. I like the little attack that this has. So now I'm going to use the tone control. The tone control adjusts the amount of feedback. Depending how much feedback a patch has, this may have a greater or lesser effect. It's a secondary function of the color knob, so I'm going to lock Shift by pressing Function and Shift, and I'm going to listen to how it sounds for this patch. So this is with full feedback level. So we can hear the sound is softened, not necessarily dramatically, but it is. And let's listen to the effect on the other, because the tone parameter applies to both sounds simultaneously. So we can see that the Vox patch has very little impact. The tone is not really changing it. So I'm going to decide on where to set the tone level based on how the second patch sounds. Okay, that's a little bit softer. So now I've got the tone set. The color we're going to adjust afterwards, but first I'm going to turn the morphing control and I'm going to listen and find a timbre that I like. So this is the first sound of the morph, or the second one, and this is the first one, so let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to try and experiment now with the color control. The color control adjusts how and when during the morph the operators switch when locking between one configuration and another. So you'll find that the timbre is different for any given point on the morphing spectrum. So let's listen. So the first color is red, orange, yellow, green, blue. I don't know what color that is. Light black, purple. So I think this green sound is quite interesting to me. So compare this to the colors at the sounds at the extreme. So this is the original sound. So the attack is softened a little bit. There's a little bit more variation in the sound. Not a huge difference, but I'm quite happy with it. Next, since this is a pad, I would like to have more enveloping control. And the way that I'm going to do that is by introducing a filter. By default, if I turn the cutoff knob, it says off because the filter is disabled. To enable it, a quick aside, note the images next to Shift and Funk. Shift has a picture of a knob, Funk has a picture of a button. Shift accesses the secondary functions of all the knobs. Funk accesses the secondary functions of all the buttons. The main reason for the differentiation is you would like to be able to access the secondary sound design parameters while playing the keyboard and controlling the sequencer. So two buttons are provided. In any case, filter, I would like a rising and falling envelope. I think that's appropriate for a pad. If I wanted something more plucky, there are 3 envelope types available. One is only rising, one is only falling, one is both rising and falling, which is what I'm going to go for here. So I can hear the shape. You'll have seen me done it before. I'm going to turn the resonance up, turn the cutoff down, turn the depth up, and adjust the time. Now I'm going to adjust the depth. Okay, now I'm going to turn the resonance down. Okay, I think I'm happy with that as a pad sound. I'd like maybe a bit more. I may have to go back and tweak these in the context of the other sounds because they need to mix effectively. So now I'm probably going to add a little bit of LFO. You've probably seen me before. Turn the rate up. We have access to secondary functions setting the shape of the LFO over here. So it defaults to sine. We have square, triangle, saw, reverse saw, random, which is like a sample on hold, logarithmic, reverse logarithmic. So I'm going to go for triangle shape LFO. We also have access to a delay parameter, which will delay the onset of the LFO in the sound. So if you would like, for example, vibrato to come in later, then you can do that. I'm not going to use that for now. So I've turned the rate up so as I can hear the variation easily. Turn the pitch modulation amount high. So there, filter modulation amount, and keep it more subtle, turn the rate way down. Okay, I think I'm fairly happy with that. Rather than design the other sounds completely out of context, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just play or use the step sequencing mode with tie enabled to just record one chord playing in here, which is going to play in a loop so I have context. So what should I play? How about this? Now while I hold these down, I can turn this knob and this will select when the playing will end. So if I hit play, okay, in this case probably I want things to be happening at a slightly different rate, so I'm going to change this to 8th notes. I'm going to increase the release time. Okay, so this gives me a little bit of context. The final thing that I'm going to do is enable an effect. The reverb on this device is not the best reverb if you want really long, really spacious effect reverbs. If you just want to add a little bit of space to your sound, then it works perfectly well. So I've set the amount, which is the volume of the effect, to middle. I've set the speed, which is actually the length of the tail, to slightly above middle, and now I'm going to adjust the send amount, which is a secondary function here. So I'm going to turn it down, no reverb. Okay, I think that'll work. I'm going to try a register lower. Let's see. I'd say I'm happy with that sound, so now we're going to move on to the second part. This part is going to be a bass line. Now for a bass line, I want a monophonic sound, and I think it makes sense to use legato. So legato means that if I press multiple keys while overlapping, one key pressing to the next, then we're going to get the envelope not re-triggering. So it's a useful feature. The other thing which legato gives you is actually you can have portamento, which generally I quite like. So at the moment there's no portamento, but if I enable this function, so you hear the portamento on the voice adjust. This is where you would adjust the type of arpeggiator if you were using an arpeggio type voice. Okay, I think that's okay. Now I'm going to go in and actually design the sound for the bass. As before, I think it makes most sense to use the XLab engine. So XLab engine is already selected. Given that I want a bass, I'm going to select one of the bass banks here, and I'll select bass bank 2 here. Patch 1. Okay, I quite like the sound of that. Okay, that sounds pretty interesting to me. Now I'm going to check the impact of tone, just like last time. Very little impact on this sound. Go to the other sound. Okay, I think I'm going to turn it down just a fraction, which I have. So now I'm going to try and morph. Okay, now I'm going to try and adjust the color, so we'll see if we get any variations that I prefer. Firstly, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, light blue, purple. So I think what I like is orange. It's quite bright, but I'm going to use that along with a filter. So again, filter, value knob to select the type. I'm going to use a falling envelope, just as I did before. Resonance up, cutoff down, depth up. I'm going to use this to set the time. It's probably okay. So now the resonance is very high at the moment. So we can hear at the moment, the pad sounds very loud compared to this bass sound. So first thing I'm going to do is turn the pad down a bit. So I select the part, hold shift, adjust the level. Second thing I'm going to do, turn this part up a bit. Okay, so I think that balance is okay. Just like I did for the other part, I'll play a quick line in. Probably going to be easier to do it in real time, so I'm going to enable the metronome. I usually have pre-count on, but I think I'll turn pre-count off. One of the reasons that I'm turning pre-count off is sometimes when you have a pre-count, it's hard to get note 1 in the right spot. And if you don't have the metronome on, the pre-count still happens, which is, I think, a little inconvenient. So let's play. Okay, so this is not intended to be the track that we'll be using, but this is a placeholder for us. I'm going to experiment adding a little bit of LFO. Okay, I think I'm happy with how that sounds. Part 3 is going to be a little bit different to the other parts. This is because I'm going to be using the patch locking to play different drum sounds. I'm probably also going to experiment with the random feature and the random parameter, but for now I'm just going to put in a very straightforward drum part. So I'm going to enable patch locking. This should be orange. I'm going to use the library engine because that's going to be the most straightforward way to find the sounds here. So bank is going to be first kick. And let's listen to a kick sound, maybe the high kick. Okay, so I'm going to place it here and there maybe. So if I play, I'll mute the other two parts just temporarily. Okay, so now I'm going to pick another sound, so from the snare bank. Okay, I think that works fine. So I think the tempos may be a little high. Okay, let me just add some hats for some other interest here. Okay, so let's add a hat. Let's think here, here, here and here. So very boring drum line, nothing very interesting going on. I might add couple more hats, which I'll then randomize slightly. So now I'm in normal parameter locking mode, so I'm not patch locking anymore. So this one I'm setting probability 75%, 75%, 60%. Okay, so normally you probably don't want much reverb on this type of thing, but I'm going to try. So just a little bit of space there. It's possible that I'll want a filter. So what I'm going to do is enable a filter, but I don't actually want an envelope here. So what I've done is, oh, and also I probably want this monophonic as I mentioned before. Yeah, so the resonance shapes the sound a little bit. So when I unmuted there, muting is holding function and pressing these buttons, you may notice that the partially played pad note came in and continued. The reason that happens is because the mutes are actually audio and not event-based. That has pluses and minuses, but it's worth being aware of. Okay, so the drums I think are maybe a little bit loud. Okay, finally onto the lead sound. I'm going to go a little quicker this time. We're already in the XLab engine, so I'm going to pick, let's see, pads, basses, kicks, snares, keys, leads. Okay. So this sounds quite boring on its own, but I'm hoping that if I mix this with something, it'll be more interesting. So let's pick our other lead sound. Let's try adjusting the tone. Varies a lot. This one I suspect will vary a lot too. Now let's morph. So I quite like the overall timbre there. Now I'm going to get another filter in. Let's have a falling envelope. Let's set some resonance, turn this down, turn this up. Okay, I think that's going to work for us. The depth is going to be a bit high. Let's add some reverb. It's a bit too much like the bass line. So I hope we can hear everything in context now. Try adjusting the volume of this part. Okay, so we have a very uninteresting one-bar loop, but this contains the 4 sounds that we're going to use for the rest of this project. So I'm going to save these into the last 4 pattern slots of the second bank. So save, bank select, bank 2, save, next one, save, next one. You'll note that the names correspond to the name of the pattern that was loaded. This was a blank pattern. If you actually want to rename these things, function data pattern name edit. Now we have to go and pick the one that we want to edit, and now we can go in and edit the name of this. So let's call this, let's go all the way, let's see, the number's blank, so I guess I'm going to call this A0 is probably acceptable. So this is going to be my A section. It's after 9. So that's A0. Okay. So now this pattern is called A0. This one is going to become my B section. So I'm going to go through. In fact, there's no reason for you to watch me doing this. So thank you very much for listening and watching. Now we have our sounds. Next episode, we're going to come back and start doing some composition, and then we'll move into arrangement and adding some other movement and automations. Thank you very much, and goodbye.